All right, so let's see here what we've got. Plot is this week's one. And this is going to be a rather short PowerPoint. All right, so what is plot? Well, Aristotle says plot in his book Poetics is considered to be the most important factor in a story. He believes the plot should imitate one action and that a whole, the structural union of the parts, being such that any one of them displaced or removed, the whole will be disjointed and disturbed. So his test for a good plot was whether any given action is a case of proctor hoc on account of this, or post hoc after this. So Aristotle viewed plot in a very linear form, and he had his story kind of telling one point followed by another, and then the causality of those points being an essential element. In the modern era, we don't view plot quite so linear, in such a linear manner, and in fact we see a lot of stories where plot is not really linear at all. If any of you guys are fans of Kurt Vonnegut, you know Slaughterhouse-Five is perhaps one of the greatest examples of this, where he literally, our main character literally jumps through space and time in an almost random fashion. So in those cases, plot doesn't necessarily exist on a single line. And aside from Aristotle, another critic, E.M. Forster, he kind of agreed with Aristotle in the cause and effect element of plot, even though he didn't see it quite as linear an issue. He felt that story was the narrative events with their linear time sequence, while plot was more of an emphasis on causality. One point, action A leading to action B, which then results in action C. So, what are some of the main elements of plot? Well, one of our most essential aspects of plot is conflict. And conflict in its most elemental form is a battle, which could be psychological, it could be physical, an actual battle. Think Rocky, emotional, etc. Between a protagonist and an antagonist most of the time. However, conflict is not just between people. In fact, there are four main types of conflict. Conflict is struggle against another person. Rocky Balboa against his opponent. A struggle against nature. The Leonardo DiCaprio film where he's out in the wilderness. Struggle against society. The Handmaid's Tale. Struggle for mastery by two elements within one person. Perhaps one of the best examples of that is Fight Club, where we find out the character is actually the same person with two personalities. And some critics will even go with a fifth one, which is against fate or destiny. Think Oedipus. Now, aside from conflict, we have structure, and that's kind of the foundation of the story, just like a structure is the foundation of a building. While plot is concerned with conflict, structure organizes the conflict. Structure can keep the story interesting by laying out plot in unique and original ways. However, a predictable structure can make the most exciting plot boring. So even though the layout of structure can be different, most narrative structures share these five aspects. Exposition, which is the kind of laying out of the material, the beginning of the story. Complication, the onset of a major conflict. Crisis, the separation between what has gone before and what will come after. Usually it's a decision or action undertaken to resolve the conflict. Climax, which is a consequence of the crisis. It's the story's high point, which may take the shape of a decision and action, an affirmation, a denial, an illumination or realization, or, in the case of Rocky, an actual fight. And 5, resolution or denouncement, which is the finishing of things, the kind of the climax. And we can see all this put together in what's called Freytag's triangle. So we have our beginning with our complication, our climax, and then we have our denouncement followed by our resolution. So boom, boom, boom. And notice the complication is much longer than the denouncement. It takes longer to get to the climax than from the climax to the end. All right, so let's get this in an example you guys may recognize. So here's a version of Freytag's triangle with Harry Potter. So most of you have seen Harry Potter. So we have our exposition, which is when, you know, Harry's at his aunt's and uncle's house, and, you know, he kind of starts his thing. We have our first kind of beginning conflict when he's invited to Hogwarts, but there's some struggle to try to stop him. Then the rising action, Harry leaves for Hogwarts. He is sorted into Gryffindor's house. You know, he meets Ron and Hermione. They both become friends. They suspect Professor Snape. They discover the Sorcerer's Stone's hidden. And then they discover about Voldemort. And that's when we hit our climax, when Harry confronts Quirrell as he's trying to give Voldemort the Sorcerer's Stone. And then the falling action is Dumbledore explaining Voldemort's powers to Harry and how Harry was able to conquer, and the Gryffindor wins the House Cup. And that goes into the resolution where Harry returns to his relatives' home for the summer until the next school year begins. So we kind of, and that will bring us back to the beginning where Harry again has to leave from his aunt and uncle's house. So you can see this kind of triangle forming. All right, so you're gonna have other PowerPoints, ones that focus on our 3 stories this week, as well as I have something here that explains a little more about your paper. Enjoy the week.